When tariffs go up, do prices at the store rise right away or only later, and by how much? Today we set the stage with a framework the Fed staff use to detect tariff effects in real time. In short, marry monthly consumer price data with a map of how much each spending category relies on imports directly and through supply chains. Then translate tariff changes into a predicted price push you can compare with what actually happened. So the data. So we start with two BEA data sets that don't natively speak the same language, one being monthly PCE price data by consumption category, the stuff that consumers actually buy, and two is the input-output, or IO tables, that show which industries supply those goods and services and how much of their inputs come from abroad, and from which regions. Because PCE prices are organized by consumption categories while IO tables are organized by supplying industries at producer prices, you use the BEA's PCE bridge to align them. So direct versus indirect import content. So with the merged view, you can compute for each PCE category how much it depends on direct imports, meaning they're the final goods we buy that's imported, and indirect imports, meaning the foreign imports are used as basically parts to make the domestic goods and services. So this gives a cleaner import content number for every category. So cleaning the panel. The Fed dropped three of the noisy categories that you see in the paper, and I'll attach it to the video and podcast as well. So, and those categories were CPI-based PCE measures that have large sampling variance and outsized inflation swings around tariff episodes. So basically those three categories were glassware, tableware, and household utensils, then magazines, newspapers, and stationery, and then jewelry and watches. And so they're small in weight, but big in volatility, so excluding them raises the signal-to-noise ratio. From tariffs to a predicted price push. So under a full pass-through assumption, tariff-inclusive import prices rise by the tariff amount, while domestic producers, wholesalers, and retailers keep constant dollar markups, which you translate a tariff change into a category level tariff effect. So technically, basically, it's like for every category, we'll say I, and then every country, you could say C, you multiply the tariff change applied to said country by that category's import content from that country, and then sum across all of the countries that we're importing from. And that yields a predicted price impact you can compare to relative or realized inflation. It's basically the average of all of them. So why the country of origin matters. There's fast and slow channels. So when tariffs hit final goods, for example, like many Chinese imports, the predicted effects show up faster than if tariffs only raise costs of intermediate inputs moving through long supply chains. So in their illustration, a hypothetical 10% point tariff on China, many core goods categories would see at least a 1% price increase with direct pass-through accounting for the bulk of the total. And you can see how the origin detail changes the story. So like pharmaceuticals have a high import share overall, but low for China. And so China only tariffs barely move in that category. So key assumptions. So basically why they can miss. So the framework is explicit about what it doesn't capture. If consumers or firms can substitute away from tariffed items, predicted effects may overstate real pass-through. If substitution is hard, they may understate it. If domestic producers raise prices because tariffs protect them from competition, not just because their inputs get pricier, the measures understate effects. The framework also abstracts from retaliatory tariffs and assumes ex-tariff import prices are otherwise unchanged. If foreign suppliers cut pre-tariff prices and then realized pass-through would look smaller. Finally, it assumes retailers and wholesalers keep dollar markups if they target constant percent margins instead. The predicted effects are again on the low side. The bottom line is the translation from tariffs is predicted PCE inflation is disciplined but intentionally first order. So, at least in this model. Why focus on PCE and not just import prices? So, import price indices exclude tariffs by construction, and much of China's exposure is in final goods sold to consumers. So measuring pass-through and PCE prices, goods in the stores, lets the analysis catch the consumer-facing impact directly, not just at the border. Putting it to work. So once you've built the predicted tariff effect for each category, you can run an event study regressions around a specific tariff action to see the slope and intercept. For example, how realized inflation lines up with the predicted exposure, and then B, estimate local projections to chart the timing of pass-through across months. And then we'll talk about this both of those in more in depth in the next episode. And so basically, to recap, the framework works like this. You unify consumer price data with an import content map, translate tariff changes into a predicted push for each category, then test those predictions against actual inflation using event studies and dynamics. It's transparent about assumptions and limits, but it's also powerful because it lets you see the tariffs pass through as data arrive, not years later. And the next time we'll run through the framework, basically comparing the 2018 to 19, and then the earlier this year, the February to March 2025 tariff waves, and see how much and how fast those prices moved. So there's that, and I will see you on the next one.